So I'd like to go over with you the comma rules, the second chunk that have to do with the introduction of a sentence. So the one thing I want to emphasize is with these comma rules, you're always looking at the first word or the first couple of words in a sentence. So the first rule under this is using a comma after words that are brief and they just sort of set your sentence off like well, yes, and no. That's a pretty easy rule. The second one is an intro prep phrase. With this rule, you really have to be able to recognize prepositions. Remember that prepositions have no subject and verb. So anytime you are thinking it's a preposition, look close by and say, is there a subject or a verb? No subjects and verbs. Let's get that down here. With the third rule, it's a participial phrase. That's the newest idea that you've been introduced to. And a participial or a participle looks like a verb, but it's really used as an adjective. So what you're going to do for this one is you're going to look at the first word in the sentence and you're going to say, is that a verb? And if it is a verb and it has an ing or an ed at the end of it, and it is used as an adjective to describe your subject, then you have a participial phrase. Now, sometimes you don't have an ing or an ed at the end of it because it's a verb and it is an irregular verb. And we'll see an example of this in one of the sentences. But you do have irregular verbs that may end with an N or something else. All right, number 4 then is using commas with an intro adverb clause. Remember, adverb clauses do have subjects and verbs, and they start with this thing called a dependent or a subordinating conjunction, which makes that part of the sentence dependent on the rest of the sentence to make sense. Let's look at this example. When you have finished this assignment, and you can see you've got your subject you and have finished is your verb phrase. And the word when makes that whole thing that I've underlined a dependent adverb clause. And it sounds like a cliffhanger. So think about it as a cliffhanger. When you have finished this assignment, dot, 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 what will happen? That's why it's dependent because it doesn't finish its complete thought. So in brief, this is a summary. You're looking for intro elements at the beginning of a sentence. So you'd start with yes, well, and no. You're looking for intro prep phrases, and hopefully you can rely on your knowledge from this year and last on what a preposition looks like. You're looking for intro participial verbs. Mostly they're verbs that end in ing or ed, and they function as adverbs. And you're looking for intro adverb clauses. The cliffhanger, it has a subject and a verb. So we'll start with 1. On her way to her first period class, you put a comma after class because we have 2 prep phrases. And so that's rule number 2, 2 prep phrases. Okay? This is going to be a little bit hard to write, but here we go. As you read each vignette of the house on Mango Street, you put a comma there, and you notice right away that is obviously not an intro word. As is not an intro preposition. It's not a participial because as is not a verb. So it leaves only, it's an intro adverb clause. Let's check. Does it have a subject and a verb? It does. Okay. So that's going to be rule number 4. We look at 3. Again, let's go through the 4 rules up top. This is not an intro word. It is not a prep phrase. It is not it could be a participial. Okay, we've got ing and Scrabble, a strange new word that was made up by some English teacher, but that is our verb functioning like an adjective because it's telling us more about Jem. You put your comma here, scrabbling under the fence. Jem caught his pants and had to abandon them. So sentence number 3 is intro participial phrase, rule number 3. In the front of the courtroom, we put a comma there and we look at the first word in, and that's not an intro word. That's a prepositional phrase. In fact, it's 2 of them, but you put the comma after the second. So that is rule number 2. And then you go to 5, it's simple. It's yes, comma. That's rule number 1. Stunned by the verdict, comma. Well, that's not an intro word. That's not a prepositional phrase. It is a participial. To stun is a verb, and we put an ed. It's functioning as an adjective because it tells us more about Jem. Although the novel is fictional, comma, we look at this, we look at the word although. That's not an intro word like well, yes, and no. Is it a prep phrase? No, because prep phrases don't have verbs in them. Is it a participial? No, because this is not a verb and it does not end in ing or ed. Could it be an intro adverb clause? It is indeed, because you have a subject and a verb in it. So that is rule number 4. Number 8, singing at the top of her lungs. And we look at this one here. It's not an intro word. It's not a prepositional phrase. It's a participial because it ends in ing and it starts with the verb sing. Singing at the top of her lungs does function as an adjective describing Jocelyn. And so again, that is rule number 3. I hope that helps. Bye.